I used to believe I understood love. At 45, I thought I knew what it meant for love to settle, to soften into routine. Life with my husband Richard had become a series of quiet mornings, shared meals, and wordless comforts. The fiery passion of youth had faded, replaced by something warm and steady. I'd convinced myself that was enough. And then, one spring evening, something happened that I never saw coming. It was supposed to be a simple dinner. Richard had invited his colleague Jonathan over. They'd been working together for months, and I'd only met him in passing. He was polite, thoughtful, the kind of man you'd never expect to disrupt anything. A few years younger than Richard, perhaps in his late 40s, Jonathan carried himself with a quiet self-assurance that wasn't obvious at first, but that night I saw it. Dinner was simple: roast chicken, a salad, and a good bottle of wine. The conversation flowed easily, laughter echoing softly through the dining room as they reminisced about work and old stories. I found myself slipping into the background, clearing plates, refilling glasses, floating in and out of their conversation like I'd done for years. But then Richard stepped away to grab another bottle of wine. Jonathan and I were alone. I hadn't noticed the way he looked at me until that moment. It wasn't the polite attentiveness from earlier in the evening. There was intensity there, quiet but unmistakable. His voice lowered. "Eleanor," he said, "I hope you don't think I'm being forward, but I've wanted to tell you something for a while." I froze. "I've always admired you," he continued. "Not just because you're Richard's wife, but because of the way you carry yourself. There's a strength in you, a quiet grace." I didn't know what to say. Compliments weren't new, but this felt different. It wasn't just admiration. It was intimate, personal. Before I could respond, Richard returned, and just like that, the moment dissolved. But it lingered. Later that night, after Richard took a phone call, Jonathan stayed behind. There was a pause, and then he said it: "I think I've developed feelings for you." I felt the words like a blow to the chest. My breath caught, my world tipped sideways. I wanted to believe I misunderstood, but the sincerity in his eyes told me I hadn't. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said gently. "I just couldn't keep it inside anymore." I barely managed a response before he left, but as the door closed behind him, I felt something shifting, like a seam inside me had quietly split open. 4 days, I tried to push it away. I immersed myself in routine, but no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't ignore what Jonathan had said or how it made me feel. Not because I reciprocated his feelings, not entirely, but because something in me had stirred. Something I hadn't felt in years: desire to be seen, to be wanted. Not as a wife, not as someone's comfort, but as me. I hadn't told Richard. I didn't know how. I told myself it would pass, that it had meant nothing, but that was a lie I couldn't keep up for long. Then, by chance, we ran into Jonathan at a cafe. Richard greeted him cheerfully, oblivious, but as Jonathan's eyes met mine, something passed between us again, unspoken but undeniable. Later, Richard asked me what was wrong. I lied again. But that night, I made a decision. I needed clarity. I messaged Jonathan and asked to meet. We sat across from each other at a quiet cafe, sunlight filtering through the windows. His face was tired, vulnerable. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I just had to be honest with you." I asked him what he wanted. He didn't ask for anything in return, just the truth. Just that I see it for what it was. And I did. I wasn't in love with Jonathan, but his words had exposed something I couldn't ignore. I was lonely, not because Richard had failed me, but because somewhere along the way, I had stopped looking for connection, stopped expecting to be seen. I realized then that it wasn't about Jonathan. It was about me. That I owed Richard the truth. That night, I told him everything, about Jonathan, about the confession, about the confusion I'd been carrying like a secret weight. Richard didn't explode. He didn't accuse. He just listened. And I could see the hurt in his eyes, raw and real. "I'm not angry," he said, his voice strained, "but this hurts." We sat in silence for a long time. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if things will ever go back to how they were, or if they should. But for the first time in a long time, something has been broken open inside me. And maybe that's where healing begins.